today we are talking about managing a mobile workforce then. And this is about engaging your Deskless teams. So I'm Victoria, and I head up TenSpace, and the work that we do over at TenSpace is all about employee engagement. So we've got a engagement platform, an anonymous feedback platform that captures anonymous feedback from employees. So the work that I do is about helping organisations to capture the right feedback in the right way, and then use that in order to go and build engagement within their teams and within their organisations. So some of the ways that we capture, that we survey and we capture anonymous employee feedback is via, we use email, we use WhatsApp, and we use SMS. And naturally what that does is it means that our kind of tech lends itself to mobile and deskless teams, as well as, teams that are based email based as well, but we can kind of really easily get at those teams. So actually we have quite a large population of clients. We do a lot of kind of engagement work around deskless and mobile workforce, hence the topic of the webinar today. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about today then, we're going to talk about some of kind of why these populations can be challenging, not challenging individuals, but kind of challenging to engage, I guess, and some of the kind of the forces that we're up against with when it comes to some of these teams. We're going to talk about an engagement model that we use in TenSpace, and some of the things that we observe when we're working with these types of populations. And I share those as almost kind of a way for those of you who've got these populations to kind of reflect on, have I got a gap here? You know, do I need to kind of be putting that in some kind of action plan somewhere? So yeah, I guess without further ado, let's crack on. So who are we talking about then? So when I'm talking about deskless teams or remote teams or frontline workers or mobile teams, and I'll probably annoyingly use those terminology interchangeably as we go through, I'm talking really about, what I'm really getting at is employees who don't really have an email address, like a kind of a corporate email address. So those that are more naturally challenging to kind of communicate with. So we know that 80% of the global workforce are deskless, and that translates to about 2.7 billion workers globally. And we kind of put some of the industries there that are naturally that are kind of obviously have remote and workers and deskless workers, so logistics, you know, hospitality, construction, healthcare, transport. If you're on this call and you have got a population that is deskless or remote and you can't see your industry up there, please do drop it in the chat, because it's good kind of it's good sales research for us, I guess, if I'm being honest. But it's these types of populations that we're talking about. So we're talking about train drivers, we're talking about drivers, you know, we're talking about care workers in the community, for example. Those people who, you know, aren't necessarily sat in front of a laptop on a daily basis, such like me. And what's the challenge here? So there's a piece of research that was done after the pandemic, and this research was into the engagement levels across the kind of the UK, and they found that frontline workers saw the biggest decline in engagement as a result of the pandemic. Now, some of that's really natural because of the type of work that they were doing, but actually that's kind of carried on after the pandemic. So there's this population of kind of deskless remote frontline workers who are disengaged, without kind of taking it into politics. It's potentially then translated into some of the strikes that we're seeing, which is definitely, you know, some of those industries are covered by some of those people that we're seeing striking at the moment. 47% said of this population said that they were keen to move for a role for better perks and growth. So to put that into some context, what that might mean is, if you have a similar role, similar business or competitor that maybe opens up next door, maybe they're giving them a couple of bits of extra holiday, a bit of a clearer career path, Potentially you might have up to, you know, almost 50% of your population who would rather go next door. That kind of loyalty in these populations isn't there. And as the kind of cost of living crisis is increasing, we're seeing that the, you know, the loyalty just isn't there in these populations. 1 in 3 said that they felt disconnected from their colleagues in head office or headquarters. I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that's important later on, but this is really kind of that thought there is about kind of disconnection and that lack of engagement that they have with you know, those kind of central functions and the core teams. 4 in 10 said that they felt that management were out of touch. We do sometimes see this in engagement surveys where people, employees in these populations will say, you know, I've told you this before, or you're not listening, or you don't understand our role, etc. And that seems to translate into kind of the wider populations, where 4 in 10 said they felt that management were out of touch. And this all kind of contributing to this engagement challenge that we've got with these kind of more dispersed workforces. Layering that on then, so what's some of the kind of the labour force, if you like, challenges that we've got? So we're not that far off from having a record number of vacancies in the UK. Vacancies peaked in the UK in June 2022. We're kind of the latest data was for November. We had 1.25 million vacancies in the UK. Unemployment rates are still quite low in the UK at the kind of 3.7%. And we've got over 1 million less people in the labour market as a result of Brexit and COVID. So we know that a large number of people left the UK labour market. Either they retired, came out of the labour market for kind of care reasons, or maybe they just left the country entirely as a result of Brexit and COVID. And what that is creating is an engagement issue, but also a retention issue in these critical workers. And I'm sure many of you on the call, I don't need to tell you how time consuming and how costly and how disruptive it is to have to recruit over and over again. And you know, there are organisations that I see who have a continual kind of revolving door of these types of roles, and it's costly and it's time consuming in order to replace these types of roles. So what are some of the other things that we see? So like I say, we spend time, you know, getting into engagement with exploring engagement with these types of populations, and often there's a mix of types of employees within these organisations, but in the kind of remote, dispersed, deskless workforces, we often see that there's comments around tools for the job. It's almost like they kind of work, there's that hierarchy of needs, you know, that, do you remember that triangle of that kind of hierarchy of needs? And at the bottom it's kind of, you know, have you got the tools that you need for the job? Well, 52, we often see comments around frustration with technology in their roles. So 52% of workers, this is wider research, 52% of workers said that they'd quit their jobs over tech in 2022. So, you know, there's a population of people who said, you know what, I get frustrated by the tech. So if we're thinking that, you know, a poor handheld, for example, doesn't matter, actually we do see that translating into lack of engagement in engagement surveys. And there's further research that kind of backs up that technology really does matter in these teams. Often it can be the only way that they feel connected to the organisation. You know, if you are out there driving a HGV, for example, and you know, you don't go anywhere near head office on a regular basis, but your interaction with the organisation is often through the processes and the technology that you have, actually you can see why tools for the job really matter for those people. It often comes through about lack of connection to the journey. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute as well. But again, the wider research showed that a third of these type of population, deskless workers, felt disconnected from head office. They felt that they didn't understand the goals, the journey, and where they were heading as an organisation. And poor communication and not feeling heard often really comes out in these teams, and it can be really challenging to create an employee voice in these populations. And again, that translates into some wider research. 67% of this population felt that they were rarely listened to on topics that mattered the most to them. And that's really saying, you know what, I don't feel like I've got a voice in this organisation, and I'm struggling to get my voice heard, and it's likely to do with the type of work that they do in the organisations. And so this diagram is kind of, I've used this to kind of just explore a little bit why that can sometimes happen. So if you're in the centre and you think about, maybe just spend a couple of seconds thinking about kind of the 5 people maybe outside of your immediate team that influence you the most in the organisation, and you influence them the most in the organisation. It's likely to be the people that you spend the most time with on a Zoom call, or you bump into making coffee, or you collaborate with the most. And they're your people who are kind of in your circle of influence. And actually, it can be really easy to get to the point where we think that we understand what's going on with engagement in an organisation, because we've listened lots to the people that are closest around us. We've listened lots to our circle of influence. But there's that wider people, those people who kind of circle of concern, as I would call it. People who are probably deskless, are on the road, they're fitting gas boxes out in the field, they are at the checkouts in a supermarket, etc., that we don't interact with as often, and so their voice isn't as strong, and that kind of that communication or that voice coming back in can be diluted, and that can be where that we see a direct correlation between that kind of connection that they feel and the communication that goes both ways and their levels of engagement. And when we see engagement drop, we then see retention drop, and then we're back to kind of recruiting and costs increase, etc. I'm sure I'm kind of telling everybody what they already know. So in 10 Space then, we've got an engagement model that we use, and it's around four areas, and we use this engagement model to explore engagement and culture in organisations. We look at connection, and this is about how connected employees feel to the organisation, vision, mission, values, goals, etc. Well-being is about their safety, psychological safety in the workplace. Fulfillment, that's about how kind of personally fulfilled they feel in their roles, etc. And leadership, that's about their relationships with their leaders. The work that we do with organisations is kind of building up the right kind of question sets to explore engagement. But what I thought I'd do is I'd just kind of take you through some of the key areas that we like to explore with mobile and deskless and remote workers, dispersed workers, because these are the areas that we know that kind of when we poke around it, where engagement can really be impacted in this type of population. So as I'm going through, maybe if you've got these types of populations, I kind of share this to kind of build up and, have I got a gap here? Do I need to be doing something extra over here? Do I need to be kind of over indexing in this area, etc.? So yeah, let me know what you think as we go through. So thinking about connection then. So as I said, that if you think about that circle of influence, that circle of concern, and that kind of dilution that we often see about that vision and that mission, that values and that goals, and we often ask a question around, do you understand the goals of the organisation and how you can contribute? And sometimes with deskless teams, we can see that the positive answers to those questions get less and less the further away from, metaphorically, usually the head office they are. So I'm not talking about geographically, I'm talking about kind of those people who are out on the road, etc. It's really important. Sometimes we need to really over-index in this area, because like I say, I use that example of a Deskless, somebody who's going and fitting gas boxes. They are out in customers' homes and they are representing the brand, but it might be that they are very far away from the brand itself and the values and the goals, etc. So it's really important that we continue to kind of over-index in that area. Staying with communication, this is a massive one. I probably could have done an entire webinar on communication for this type of population. I'm sure anybody who has this type of population, I don't need to tell you how challenging sometimes communication can be, but it's really important that we try and get the right information to them at the right time and in an accessible way. And we often see feedback from these types of populations to kind of say, I don't get this information, you know, I don't know what's going on, I don't, or the information's aged by the time it gets to me. This is really where technology can really help. Again, it's one of the reasons why we use WhatsApp in our products, is because we know that that's a really accessible way of reaching employees. But you know, using technology, using leaders, you know, I've worked with these populations in the past, and I always knew that my kind of killer blow was whenever I needed to get a piece of communication to someone and I knew that it needed to land, it was always kind of writing to them, for example, but making sure that we've got a really robust communication plan in place, because these populations really do notice. Having a clear employee voice, so being able to share their ideas and concerns really easily and safely, and feeling that action will be taken. So again, this is kind of where some of the work that we do comes in, of being, you know, making it really accessible to share employee voice and share feedback. Wellbeing, really key area that we see. Again, that kind of hierarchy of needs. We'll often see that employee feedback comes through about health and safety first, and then it's everything else. So I've got a safety concern I want you to know about out in those populations. And if you think, you know, often it can be out of sight, out of mind. We can often not know that there's a safety concern because we're not walking past it every day, for example. So often these populations will share with us, share as part of feedback, you know, a health and safety concern that they've got, and then they'll go on to share other things that they're concerned about. It's really important for these populations as well that they feel secure in their roles. This gets to kind of psychological safety, if you like, so they're not concerned about the future. They're not concerned about where their next paycheck's coming from and where their next, you know, where their next shift is going to be, etc. And we'll often get feedback about, you know, about that type of feedback, about that kind of security in their role. And then also about feeling valued as an individual, so that you know, we're not referring to these populations as drivers, you know, as a homogenous group, and that those leaders who are out there and that we're taking those steps to make people feel really valued as an individual. And we know that that's a really key driver to engagement, is that when people understand the value that they bring as an individual, and that's recognised in some way, which takes us nicely onto recognition and reward. Having those effective mechanisms in place can be really important, and we can really see in the data and the feedback where we've got kind of a two-tiered approach about, you know, the sales team are rewarded as heroes. I'm totally making it up, but you know, the sales team are rewarded as heroes, but you know, our people out in the community aren't recognised or rewarded as effectively, and we often see that coming through in feedback, and we know that has an impact on engagement. Talked about tools for the role, so really ensuring that technology and processes and systems are really fit for purpose and they're really engaging, so that the people who are out there using them, it's part of their experience as an employee. And access to opportunities, we often see this where there'll be an online learning platform, for example, but that might not be as accessible to these populations, or there's a weekly email that goes out that's got job adverts on, and that doesn't go out to everybody because not everybody's got email, etc. And again, you know, hopefully these aren't examples that are happening in your organisation, but it's certainly stuff that we see. I'm hoping it's kind of prompting a couple of thoughts about that, kind of sometimes where some gaps and some chasms can open up, and we can really impact on engagement for these populations who already feel a little bit isolated because they aren't in an office, or they're not necessarily with team members every day. I've left leadership to last because this can often be the most important thing to getting this right and building engagement in these teams, is how we invest in these leaders. Often the work that we'll do when we've got populations of these teams is to make sure that those leaders who are heading up these teams are themselves engaged. Because if we are expecting them, sometimes they can be the only point of contact that we have. And Deskless teams, they're often, those people leaders aren't Deskless, you know, they do have that direct point of contact, and often they're the single point of contact and that connection point between a Deskless team and a head office team, for example. And so it's so important that those leaders themselves are engaged, because what we're expecting them to do is go and share the communication, share the messaging, share the vision and the mission, the values, the goals, etc., and be that face of the organisation often for those populations. It's really important that we're making sure that they're engaged as leaders, and that we're kind of we're circling them as a population in themselves. And visibility, having that visibility from leadership and really creating that kind of additional connection. You know, it's not often, but we do sometimes kind of see those comments coming through about, I don't know who the exec leadership team are, or I've never seen them, or, you know, they never come and visit us or whatever. And it can often kind of help contribute to that kind of chasm that can open up. And then ensuring that that leadership team, those people leaders who are supporting those Deskless workers, really feel like they've got that autonomy to support and create opportunities for their teams in the best ways that they possibly can. We know that that will contribute to engagement for these teams. So I have mentioned it a couple of times, but just kind of what we the work that we do around employee feedback and surveys. You know, what we suggest is that you really try and capture employee feedback on a regular basis. It doesn't need to be surveys, but it's about having those regular feedback mechanisms in place. Of course, I'm a big advocate for surveys, that's the work that I do, but making sure that you're capturing employee feedback from all corners of the organisation on a really regular basis, and creating that feedback loop to demonstrate that you're taking action, so that there isn't this kind of vacuum of feedback happening, and that employees know that if understand, maybe, you know, you said this and we did this, you said this and we did this, and then use it, if you are using surveys, using it as a layered approach to feedback, and making sure that in the moment, the face-to-face feedback still happening, and that we're really creating that employee voice in all corners of our organisation, so that we don't end up with just kind of a culture of feedback that's based on kind of what I would call the vocal minority, the people who are closest to the influencers and the decision makers. And always with these webinars, I will always encourage you, if you've done a survey recently, take this as your sign to kind of go and dig out that feedback and that data, and go and have a look if there's areas that you need to be kind of planning into your engagement plan for this coming year. I'd really encourage you to go and do that, because you might be able to positively impact on engagement and retention in these really critical teams. And then if you want to get really geeky with this stuff and you want to kind of go a layer deeper, then you can start to have a look at their employee experience and really kind of put yourself in their mindset. And this is some work that we've been doing recently about really looking at kind of deskless workers in the main as a population, and really exploring in some detail what their experience is. So, you know, what happens when they clock on in the morning? Who do they see? What's it feel like? What does that tech feel like? You know, what are their experiences as they go through their day? What's their experiences as they go through their week? And we can build up a really rich picture. We've been, you know, of engagement data, so that we can really understand what it feels like to be a deskless worker. And we know that that can really pay dividends. So there's a great piece of research, and we'll share all these stats with you after the call. There was a really great piece of research that studied some retail workers. And they looked at two pots of retail workers. One, they invested heavily in employee experience and really kind of, did additional investment. And the other one, they just kind of left as was. And what they found was, over a period of time, it directly translated into the profitability of those two teams. The revenue that those two teams were generating and the profitability of those two teams was stark, to the point where they calculated that the return on investment of investing additionally in employee experience was actually 150% return on investment. So you want to go, like, get really kind of into some detail about deskless workers, really start to think about that employee experience, and really start to explore what it feels like to be in that team, and start to kind of really engineer their experience, because it will massively pay dividends in terms of their engagement. And then the return on investment will hopefully translate through in terms of profitability, etc. If you want to get geeky like me about it. Okay, so some key takeaways then. So focus is really needed on deskless, mobile and frontline workers to overcome engagement challenges, and we just can't leave it to chance for this population. They're not going to engage themselves. Key areas of focus are on tools, are on communication, and on connection in order to drive engagement. And that really does need to be underpinned by really effective and really engaged leadership teams. And then using tech and employee feedback effectively can really help to unpack some of the challenges in these areas and really start to rebuild the employee journey. So keeping in touch then. So this is our email, that's my email address. That is our website address. If you want to hear more of my Mancunian tones, you can check me out on the HR Directors podcast. That's a podcast that I host with a couple of other HR professionals. That's always good fun. So there's loads of ways that you can stay in touch with me. If you've got any questions about any of the content, then please just do keep in touch. We'd love to keep chatting to you about this really important topic. Thank you.